Hi, my name is Gabe Freeman, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about obligation in digital communications. What does that mean? That means that today, more so than ever, people are feeling obligated to check their digital communication devices, like their computers and their cell phones, like never before, and they're having an increasingly hard time logging off for long periods of time without feeling like they missed too much content that went up, or like feeling like they need to respond because people will be upset if they don't. I'll also offer a few solutions for people so they can reduce the amount of time they spend in front of a screen. Let's start by looking at my morning. I woke up this morning and first thing I did was I checked my cell phone. I opened it up, checked my emails that came in overnight, mostly junk, checked my texts, a couple texts that came in late at night that I missed while I was sleeping. Then I checked my social media accounts. Nothing really new, but I still checked it because I wanted to see what I missed. Put my phone away, spent about 10 minutes on it. Then, about an hour later, after breakfast, I checked it again, and I went through that same cycle. And throughout the day, I always check these accounts and my texts and my email, and I make sure I'm responding as pretty much as quickly as possible just because I feel like I need to. So, why is it that today, in 2014, a 19-year-old kid like myself feels obligated to check and respond to notifications as they come in constantly throughout the day? And the answer is simple: accessibility. The accessibility of the internet and accessing these devices has changed a lot in the last 30, 40 years. Let's take computers, for example. They only became commercially available in the early 70s. But through their first couple decades of use, the internet wasn't even available yet, and people could only use the applications that were available on those computers. The internet was first introduced in 1989. And through the first 10, 12, 15 years of the internet, content was merely what you saw on the internet. You could go on the internet and read about things, but you couldn't really create your own content. That changed when social media became more relevant in the early 2000s, and MySpace came along, and Facebook in 2004 was founded, and users now were able to generate their own content and become more actively engaged with using the internet. Similarly, cell phones were not as accessible when they first came out. The first cell phone came out in 1984. It was called the Motorola Dynatac. It cost $4,000, but it wasn't as accessible and user-friendly, and there wasn't as much to do except for make phone calls. But eventually, in 1996, the first flip phone was introduced, and then camera phones came along, and then the first smartphone was the Palm Treo. But it wasn't until Apple introduced the iPhone in 2007 that it really changed the way users would be able to access the internet from wherever they are, whenever they want, and talk to whoever they want, whenever they want. So what exactly are the implications of having this accessibility of the internet, which has evolved in the last 30, 40 years? Well, according to a Kaiser Family Foundation research report, kids between the ages of 8 and 18 spend an average of 7.5 hours in front of a screen. And according to another report done by the AAP, to be a healthy teen, you should be spending less than 2 hours a day in front of a screen. The CDC, the Center for Disease Control, has linked excessive screen time to kids being overweight, having poor performance in school, and even having weaker bones. So, what are some solutions to lessen the amount of time we spend in front of a screen? 1. I say people should start using their devices on airplane mode, which means that you can utilize your devices, except you don't get any notifications from the internet. That will allow you to completely disconnect from the outside world for extended periods of time. Another option I think that would be very useful for people is to download apps like Moment, which actually counts how much time you spend on your phone or certain social media platforms, and will even notify you when you go over your limits that you set for yourself. I really do think that people today have control over how much time they spend on their phones and their computers and on the internet, and I think we aren't doomed if people just take it into their hands a little bit. I think we should embrace these new technologies, but we should also be careful to not get carried away and become overwhelmed and too obligated to our social media accounts and whatnot. So that's my 2 cents. I hope you learned something from me today, and also reduce the amount of time you spend in front of a screen.